A man once so desperate for love that he swore never to open his heart again. A billionaire woman who owns everything but feels empty. When fate brings them together on a blind date no one wants to attend, love begins to blossom between two completely different worlds. But will a single father afraid of being hurt and a powerful CEO hiding her pain have the courage to trust each other? Follow the story to the end. Like and comment where you're watching to let me know how far this story has progressed. Daniel Hayes stood in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, watching Sophie sleep. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her face, and her small hand clutched the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. 6 years old now. 6 years of just the two of them. He pulled the door almost closed, leaving it cracked the way she liked it, and walked back down the narrow hallway of their apartment. The place wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely fit a table, a living room with a couch he'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. But it was theirs, clean, safe, predictable. That was the word that defined Daniel's life now. Predictable. He liked it that way. At 32, he'd built a routine that worked. Wake up at 6, make Sophie breakfast, drop her at school, work his shift as a supervisor at the manufacturing plant, pick her up. Homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime. Repeat. Weekends were for laundry, groceries, and whatever cartoon movie Sophie wanted to watch for the 5th time. There was no room for chaos, no room for mistakes, and absolutely no room for romance. Daniel had learned that lesson the hard way. 8 years ago, he'd been young and stupidly in love with a woman who'd promised him forever. They'd gotten pregnant unexpectedly, but he'd been ready to step up. He'd proposed, started planning a future. Then Sophie was born, and 3 months later her mother walked out. No explanation. No goodbye to their daughter. Just a note on the kitchen counter that said she couldn't do it anymore. The responsibility, the sleepless nights, the ordinary life. She needed more. Daniel had read that note 20 times before it sank in. Then he'd crumpled it up, thrown it away, and never looked back. He'd raised Sophie alone. Bottle feedings at 2 in the morning, learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, parent-teacher conferences where he was the only dad in a sea of mothers. He'd figured it out, one day at a time, and he'd done a damn good job. But it had cost him something. He didn't trust anymore. Didn't let people in. Didn't date. His sister Claire had been nagging him about it for 2 years now. "You can't live like a monk forever, Danny," she'd say. "Sophie needs to see you happy." "I am happy," he'd reply. "You're surviving. That's not the same thing." He'd brush her off every time. Until last week, when she'd cornered him at their parents' house during Sunday dinner. "I set you up on a blind date," Claire had announced, way too cheerfully. Daniel had choked on his coffee. "You what?" "Saturday night, 7 o'clock, that new Italian place downtown." "Absolutely not. Too late. I already confirmed." "Claire, her name's Victoria. She's successful, smart, and apparently very attractive. My friend from yoga knows her from some business thing. She's single and actually agreed to this, so don't you dare stand her up." "I'm not going." "Yes, you are. Mom's babysitting Sophie. It's already arranged." Daniel had stared at his sister, furious. But Claire had just smiled that infuriating big sister smile, the one that said she knew she'd already won. And that was how, on Saturday night, Daniel found himself sitting in his truck outside Romano's Italian restaurant, seriously considering just driving home. He checked his watch, 6:58. He could text Claire, say he got sick, food poisoning, flat tire, something. But then he'd never hear the end of it. She'd just set up another date. And another. Until he either went through with it or moved to a different state. "Fuck," he muttered, and climbed out of the truck. The restaurant was nicer than places he usually went. Soft lighting, cloth napkins, a hostess in a black dress who looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was lost. "Reservation?" she asked. "Hayes, there should be 2. She checked her tablet. "Yes, a table for 2. Your date hasn't arrived yet. Follow me." She led him to a table near the window. Daniel sat down, feeling like he was wearing the wrong skin. He'd put on his best jeans and the button-down shirt Claire had bought him last Christmas, the one he'd never worn. He still felt out of place. A waiter appeared with menus and a wine list Daniel didn't even glance at. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Water's fine." The waiter nodded and disappeared. Daniel checked his watch again, 7:02. Maybe she wouldn't show. That would be ideal, actually. He could tell Claire he'd tried. It just hadn't worked out, and then go home and forget this whole thing. Then the door opened. Daniel glanced up out of habit, and the air went out of his lungs. The woman who walked in was stunning in a way that made him forget how to think. Tall, maybe 5'9", with dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't. She wore a black dress that was simple but clearly expensive, and when she moved, every head in the restaurant turned. She spoke to the hostess, who immediately brightened and gestured toward Daniel's table. No. No way. This wasn't his date. This was some CEO or lawyer or someone way out of his league who just happened to be eating here tonight. But the hostess was leading her toward him, and she was looking right at him. Daniel stood up without thinking, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The woman stopped at his table. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, skin that looked like she'd never spent a day working outdoors. "Daniel?" she asked. Her voice was calm, professional, like she was in a boardroom instead of a restaurant. "Yeah," he managed. "Victoria?" "Yes." She extended her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm, confident, the kind of handshake that told you she was used to being in charge. "Please sit," she said. They both sat. The waiter reappeared instantly, like he'd been hovering nearby. "Good evening, Ms. Hale," the waiter said, and Daniel caught the shift in his tone, respectful, almost deferential. "Your usual?" "Please," Victoria said. The waiter nodded and left. Daniel stared at her. "You come here often?" "Occasionally, when I need to meet clients in a neutral setting." "Right." Because of course she did. An awkward silence settled over the table. Daniel had no idea what to say. He'd been on exactly 3 dates in the last 8 years, and all of them had been disasters. He was rusty. Hell, he'd never been good at this to begin with. Victoria folded her hands on the table and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "So," she said, "I take it your sister set this up?" "Yeah, yours?" "A colleague. She thought I needed to get out more." Victoria's mouth curved slightly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "I assume you didn't want to be here." Daniel blinked. "That obvious?" "You looked like you were planning an escape route when I walked in." He huffed a small laugh to spite himself. "I was." "Understandable. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about this either." "Then why'd you agree?" Victoria tilted her head, considering the question. "Because people who care about me insisted, and I've learned that sometimes it's easier to go along with things than to argue." "Yeah," Daniel said. "Same." The waiter returned with a glass of red wine, placing it in front of Victoria with a flourish. He turned to Daniel. "And for you, sir?" "Just water." "Are you sure? We have an excellent selection." "Water's fine," Daniel repeated. The waiter's smile tightened, but he nodded and left. Victoria picked up her wine glass, studying him over the rim. "You don't drink?" "Not really. Not anymore." "Any particular reason?" Daniel shrugged. "Just don't see the point. That wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that after Sophie's mother left, he'd spent 2 weeks drinking himself stupid every night after Sophie went to bed, trying to numb the anger and betrayal. Then one morning he'd woken up late, hungover, and realized Sophie had gotten herself dressed and made herself cereal because he'd been too wrecked to hear her calling for him. He'd poured every bottle in the apartment down the sink that day and hadn't touched alcohol since. But he wasn't about to explain that to a stranger. Victoria nodded like she understood anyway. "Fair enough." Another silence. Daniel was starting to think this was going to be the longest hour of his life when Victoria spoke again. "So what do you do, Daniel?" "I'm a supervisor at Bentley Manufacturing. We make industrial parts, rivets, fasteners, that kind of thing." "How long have you been there?" 10 years, started on the floor, worked my way up." "That's impressive." He couldn't tell if she meant it or if she was just being polite. "What about you?" "I run a company, Hale Industries. We specialize in logistics and supply chain management." Daniel had heard of Hale Industries. Everyone in manufacturing had. They were massive, contracts with half the major corporations on the East Coast. "You run it?" he said. "Like, you're the CEO?" "Yes." "How old are you?" The question came out before he could stop it. Victoria raised an eyebrow. 30? Is that relevant?" "No, I just—" Daniel stopped, realizing he was making it worse. "That's impressive. Running a company like that." "Thank you." More silence. This was painful. The waiter came back to take their orders. Victoria ordered something Daniel couldn't pronounce. He ordered spaghetti and meatballs because it was the only thing on the menu he recognized. When the waiter left, Victoria leaned back in her chair, watching him with an expression that was hard to read. "You have a daughter," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, Sophie, she's 6. Your sister mentioned that. She didn't mention a wife." "There isn't one," Victoria nodded slowly. "I see." "It's just me and Sophie," Daniel said. He didn't know why he felt the need to clarify. "Has been for a while now." "That must be difficult." "We manage." "I'm sure you do more than manage." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "I mean it," Victoria continued. "Raising a child alone while working full-time, that's not easy. Most people couldn't do it." "You do what you have to do," Daniel said. Still, they lapsed into silence again, but this time it felt slightly less uncomfortable. The food arrived. Daniel's spaghetti looked good, at least. Victoria's dish was some kind of pasta with seafood that probably cost more than Daniel spent on groceries in a week. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Victoria said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you agree to this date if you didn't want to come?" Daniel set down his fork. "Honestly, my sister wouldn't let it go. She thinks I need to start dating again." "And you don't?" "I don't have time. Between work and Sophie, there's not much left over." "That sounds like an excuse." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's not." "Okay. What about you?" he asked, more defensively than he intended. "Why are you here if you didn't want to come?" Victoria took a sip of wine. "Because my colleague was worried I'm becoming too isolated. She thinks I spend too much time working and not enough time living. And is she right?" "Probably." Victoria set down her glass and looked at him directly. "I don't date much, Daniel. My position makes it complicated. Most men are either intimidated by what I do or interested in what I have. It's exhausting." "I can imagine." "Can you?" There was a challenge in her voice, but not a cruel one, just honest. "No," Daniel admitted. "Probably not." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "I didn't mean that as an attack." "I know." They went back to eating. Daniel found himself watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something about her, beyond the obvious beauty, beyond the wealth and status. She seemed tired, not physically, but in a deeper way, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and forgotten how to put it down. He recognized that feeling. "So what does a CEO do on a typical day?" he asked, trying to move the conversation forward. Victoria looked up, seeming almost surprised by the question. "Meetings, mostly. Strategy sessions, budget reviews, negotiations with clients. I spend a lot of time managing people and putting out fires." "Sounds stressful." "It is, but I'm good at it." "I don't doubt that." She smiled, an actual smile this time, small but genuine. "What about you? What's a typical day like?" "Less glamorous. I oversee production on the floor, make sure we're hitting targets, deal with equipment issues, lots of paperwork. Then I pick up Sophie from school, and the rest of the day is hers." "What does she like to do?" Daniel felt himself relax slightly. Talking about Sophie was easy. "Everything. She's obsessed with drawing right now. And dinosaurs. She's got this book about prehistoric animals that she makes me read every night." "She sounds wonderful." "She is." Victoria tilted her head. "You light up when you talk about her." Daniel felt his face warm. "Yeah, well, she's my kid." "It's sweet." They talked more after that. The conversation didn't flow easily. There were still awkward pauses, moments where neither of them knew what to say, but it was better than before. Daniel learned that Victoria had built her company from the ground up after her father passed away and left her a struggling logistics firm. She'd spent the last 8 years turning it into an empire. Victoria learned that Daniel had grown up in a working-class family, that he'd never gone to college, that he'd planned to join the military before Sophie was born. By the time dessert came, tiramisu for Victoria, nothing for Daniel, because he was too full, the tension had eased into something almost comfortable. "This wasn't as terrible as I expected," Victoria said. Daniel laughed. "High praise." "I mean it. You're easy to talk to." "So are you." She looked at him like she was trying to decide if he was being honest. Then she nodded. "Thank you." The waiter brought the check. Daniel reached for it automatically, but Victoria was faster. "I've got this," she said. "You don't have to." "I know, but I'd like to." Daniel wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. This wasn't about money. It was about control, about not letting someone else dictate the terms. He understood that too. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." Victoria paid, and they walked out together into the cool night air. The street was quiet, just a few cars passing by. Daniel's truck was parked at the far end of the lot. Victoria's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Daniel made in a year, was right out front. They stopped between the two vehicles. "Well," Victoria said, "this was unexpected." "Yeah." "Your sister will probably want a full report." Daniel groaned. "Don't remind me." Victoria smiled, and for a moment she looked younger, less guarded. "Would you want to do this again?" she asked. Daniel blinked. "What? Dinner? Or coffee? Something less formal, maybe." He stared at her, genuinely surprised. "You want to see me again?" "Is that so hard to believe?" "Honestly, kind of." Victoria laughed, a real laugh this time, not the polite sound she'd made earlier. "You're refreshing, Daniel. Most people I meet spend the whole conversation trying to impress me or asking for favors. You didn't do either." "I didn't know I was supposed to." "You weren't, that's the point." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Victoria pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to him. "My direct number. Text me if you'd like to get coffee sometime." He took the card, feeling the weight of it. Expensive cardstock. Embossed lettering. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She got into her car and Daniel watched as she drove away, the taillights disappearing into the night. He stood there for a moment, holding the card, trying to process what had just happened. Then he got in his truck and drove home. Claire called him before he even made it back to his apartment. "Well?" she demanded the second he answered. "Hello to you too." "Don't hello me. How did it go?" Daniel sighed. "It was fine." "Fine? That's all I get?" "What do you want me to say?" "Did you like her? Did she like you? Are you seeing her again?" "I don't know, maybe." Claire squealed so loudly Daniel had to pull the phone away from his ear. "I knew it. I knew you two would hit it off." "We didn't hit it off. We just talked." "That's how it starts, Danny. I'm hanging up now. Text her, tonight." "Goodbye, Claire." He hung up before she could say anything else. Back at the apartment, his mom was asleep on the couch. Daniel woke her gently, and she gathered her things, asking the same questions Claire had. He gave her the same vague answers and practically pushed her out the door. Finally alone, he checked on Sophie, still asleep, still clutching her rabbit, and then collapsed onto his own bed. He pulled out Victoria's card, staring at the number printed beneath her name. This was insane. She was a billionaire CEO. He was a factory supervisor living paycheck to paycheck. They had nothing in common. But she'd asked to see him again. And despite everything, despite his better judgment, despite the walls he'd built, despite knowing this was probably a terrible idea, he wanted to say yes. Daniel stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and typed out a message. "Hey, it's Daniel. Coffee sounds good. Let me know when you're free." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The reply came faster than he expected. "Wednesday? There's a place near my office. I'll send you the address," Daniel typed back. "Okay." He set the phone down and rubbed his face. What the hell was he doing? But even as the doubt crept in, he felt something else too. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. What? Wednesday came faster than Daniel expected. He'd spent the last 3 days trying not to overthink it. Just coffee. That's all it was. Two people having a conversation in a public place. Nothing serious. He almost believed it. Sophie noticed something was different. "You keep looking at your phone," she said Tuesday night while they were eating dinner. "No, I don't." "Yes, you do. You did it like 5 times. Daniel set his phone face down on the table. "Sorry, Bug. Just work stuff." Sophie narrowed her eyes at him, unconvinced, but she let it go. Wednesday afternoon, Daniel left work early, something he almost never did, and drove to the address Victoria had sent him. It was a coffee shop in the business district downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a menu that listed 6 different kinds of milk. He felt out of place the second he walked in. Victoria was already there, sitting at a table near the window with a laptop open in front of her. She was dressed in a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the CEO she was. Daniel approached slowly, suddenly aware of his work boots and the grease stain on his jeans he hadn't noticed until now. Victoria looked up and smiled. Hey. Hey. Grab whatever you want. I've got a tab here. I can pay for my own coffee. I know you can, but you don't have to. Daniel didn't argue this time. He ordered a regular coffee, black, no sugar, and sat down across from her. Thanks for coming, Victoria said, closing her laptop. Thanks for inviting me. How was your day? Busy? Yours? The same. They both smiled at the awkwardness of it. We're not very good at this, are we? Victoria said. Not really. Do you want to just skip the small talk? God, yes. Victoria laughed, and just like that, the tension broke. They talked for over an hour, about work, mostly. Daniel told her about a machine that had broken down and delayed production, and Victoria told him about a contract negotiation that had gone sideways. It should have been boring, but it wasn't. There was something grounding about it, real. At some point, the conversation shifted. Can I ask you something personal? Victoria said. Sure. Sophie's mother, what happened? Daniel hesitated. He didn't talk about this. Ever. But Victoria was looking at him with genuine curiosity, not pity, and for some reason that made it easier. She left, he said simply. When Sophie was 3 months old, decided she didn't want to be a mother. I'm sorry. It's fine. We're better off. Are you? Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? You said you're better off, but you also said you don't date, you don't let people in. That doesn't sound fine. He should have been annoyed by the observation. Instead, he found himself answering honestly. I don't know, he said. Maybe I'm not fine, but I'm functional, and that's enough. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand that. Do you? More than you'd think. She told him then, in carefully measured words, about her own past. About an ex-boyfriend who'd made her feel small despite everything she'd accomplished. Who'd called her cold when she prioritized work. Who'd left her feeling like she had to choose between success and love. I chose success, she said, and I don't regret it. But sometimes I wonder if I just convinced myself I didn't need anything else because it was easier than admitting I wanted it. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the coffee shop filling the space between them. This is the most honest conversation I've had in years, Victoria said quietly. Yeah, Daniel said, me too. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he felt something shift. This wasn't just coffee. This was something else. Something he wasn't ready for but couldn't seem to walk away from. I should get back to work, Victoria said, though she didn't move. Yeah, I need to pick up Sophie. How is she? Good. She's been asking why I'm in such a good mood lately. Victoria's eyebrows lifted. Are you? Daniel realized he'd said too much. I don't know. Maybe. That's dangerous. What is? Being in a good mood because of someone else. Yeah, Daniel said. It is. They stood up together. Outside, the afternoon sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. Same time next week? Victoria asked. Okay. She smiled, and Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest. He was in trouble. He knew it. But for the first time in 8 years, he didn't care. 3 weeks turned into a month, and coffee became a standing appointment. Every Wednesday at 4, Daniel would leave work early and meet Victoria at the same coffee shop. They'd talk for an hour, sometimes 2, about everything and nothing. Work problems. Childhood memories. Bad movies they'd watched. The conversations flowed easier each time, the silences less awkward. Daniel found himself looking forward to Wednesdays in a way that scared him a little. Sophie noticed. You're different, she said one night while Daniel was helping her with her math homework. Different how? I don't know. Happier, I guess. Daniel looked at his daughter, surprised. I'm always happy, Bug. Not like this. Sophie tilted her head, studying him with those big brown eyes that saw too much. You smile more, and you sing in the shower now. I do not sing in the shower. Yes, you do. I heard you this morning. It was bad. Daniel laughed despite himself. Thanks, kid. So what's different? He hesitated. He hadn't told Sophie about Victoria yet. Hadn't told anyone, really, except Claire, who'd been insufferable about it. He wasn't sure what there was to tell. They were just friends, two people getting coffee once a week, except it didn't feel like just friendship anymore. "I've been meeting someone for coffee," Daniel said carefully. "A friend." Sophie's eyes lit up. "A girlfriend?" "Just a friend." "But is she a girl?" "Yes." "Do you like her?" Daniel set down his pencil. Why all the questions? "Because you're being weird about it." Sophie grinned. "You like her. Eat your dinner. You didn't say no." Sophie. She giggled and went back to her chicken nuggets, but Daniel could see the wheels turning in her head. He'd have to be more careful. The following Wednesday, Daniel arrived at the coffee shop to find Victoria already there, but something was off. She was staring at her laptop screen with an intensity that bordered on anger, her jaw tight. "Hey," Daniel said, sitting down. Victoria barely looked up. "Hey. Everything okay?" "Fine." It clearly wasn't. Daniel ordered his coffee and waited. When Victoria still hadn't said anything 5 minutes later, he tried again. "You want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Okay." They sat in silence. It wasn't comfortable this time. Victoria typed furiously, her fingers practically attacking the keyboard. Daniel sipped his coffee and tried not to feel like he'd done something wrong. Finally, Victoria closed the laptop and rubbed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm being rude." "It's fine." "No, it's not. You took time out of your day to be here, and I'm sitting here ignoring you." "Bad day?" "You could say that." Victoria leaned back in her chair, looking exhausted. "One of my major clients is threatening to pull their contract because they found someone who can do it cheaper. Never mind that we've worked with them for 5 years. Never mind that we've never missed a deadline. They found someone who'll undercut us by 3%, and suddenly loyalty means nothing." Daniel nodded. "That's business, I guess." "I know, but it's frustrating. I built relationships with these people, or I thought I did." "So what are you going to do?" "Fight for it. What else can I do?" Victoria picked up her coffee, then set it back down without drinking. "I'm sorry. You didn't come here to listen to me complain about work." "I don't mind." "You should. It's boring." "It's not." Daniel meant it. "You care about what you do. That's not boring." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "Most people don't see it that way." "Most people are idiots." She laughed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "True." They talked about other things after that. Daniel told her about a fight Sophie had gotten into at school with a boy who'd said girls couldn't like dinosaurs. And Victoria told him about a disastrous presentation where the projector had died halfway through. The conversation found its rhythm again. As they were getting ready to leave, Victoria hesitated. "I have a work event this Saturday," she said. "A charity gala. Very boring, very corporate. I'm required to bring a guest." Daniel waited. "Would you want to come?" He blinked. "To a gala?" "I know it's not your thing. It's not really mine either, to be honest. But I'd rather spend 3 hours making small talk with you than alone." Daniel tried to picture himself at a charity gala. Tuxedos and champagne and people who spent more on shoes than he did on rent. The idea made his skin crawl. But Victoria was looking at him with something that might have been hope, and he found himself saying yes before he could think better of it. "Okay," he said, "but I don't have a tux." "You can rent one. I'll send you the address of a good place." "This is a terrible idea." Victoria smiled. "Probably, but I'd like you there anyway." Saturday came too fast. Daniel stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, tugging at the bow tie that refused to sit right. The tux fit well enough. Victoria had been right about the rental place, but he still felt like a kid playing dress-up. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her eyes going wide. "Whoa," she said. "You look fancy." "I look ridiculous." "No, you look good. Like a prince or something." Daniel snorted. "Thanks, Bug." "Is this for your girlfriend?" "She's not my—" He stopped. "Yes, we're going to a work thing." "Can I meet her?" "Not tonight." "Why not?" Because Daniel wasn't ready for those worlds to collide. Because bringing Victoria into Sophie's life meant this was real, and he wasn't sure he could handle that yet. "Soon," he said instead. "Maybe." Sophie looked disappointed but didn't push it. Claire arrived to babysit. She'd volunteered the second Daniel mentioned the gala, clearly thrilled that things were progressing, and gave him an embarrassing once-over. "Look at you," she said, "all grown up. Shut up. Have fun. Don't drink too much. Be a gentleman." "I don't drink." "Oh, right. Well, be charming then." Daniel left before she could offer any more advice. Victoria had given him the address of the venue, some hotel ballroom downtown that probably cost more per night than Daniel made in a month. He parked his truck in the garage, feeling acutely aware of how out of place it looked next to the Mercedes and BMWs, and made his way inside. The ballroom was exactly what he'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, people in designer clothes holding glasses of wine, and talking in voices that carried just enough to be heard but not enough to seem loud. Classical music played from somewhere. Daniel felt every eye on him as he walked in. He spotted Victoria across the room, talking to an older man in a gray suit. She was wearing a dark blue dress that somehow managed to be elegant and understated at the same time. Her hair down for once, falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She looked up and saw him. Her face lit up in a way that made the whole uncomfortable evening worth it. She excused herself from the conversation and walked over, and Daniel forgot how to breathe for a second. "You came," she said. "I said I would."
"You look good." "I look like I'm about to wait tables." Victoria laughed. "No, you don't. Come on, I'll introduce you to some people." The next hour was a blur of handshakes and names Daniel forgot immediately. Everyone wanted to talk to Victoria. Business partners, potential clients, people who clearly just wanted to be seen talking to her. She handled it with practiced ease, smiling and nodding and saying all the right things. Daniel stood beside her, feeling useless. He had nothing to contribute to conversations about market trends and supply chain optimization. A few people asked what he did, and when he said he worked in manufacturing, they'd nod politely and change the subject. He was about to excuse himself to the bathroom, just to get a break from the suffocating small talk, when Victoria's hand found his. She didn't say anything, didn't even look at him, just laced her fingers through his while she continued talking to some investor about quarterly projections. But the gesture said everything. "I know this sucks. Thank you for being here anyway." Daniel squeezed her hand back. They made it through dinner, some kind of chicken dish that was pretty good, actually, and a speech from the charity's founder that went on too long. When the dancing started, Victoria turned to him. "Want to get out of here?" "You can leave? I've made my appearance. That's all that matters." They slipped out while everyone else was distracted by the band. Outside, the night air was cool and clean after the stuffiness of the ballroom. Victoria leaned against the wall and kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "I hate those things," she said. "Then why wear them?" "Because people expect it." She picked up the shoes and walked barefoot toward the parking garage. "God, that was exhausting. You were good at it." "I've had practice." Victoria glanced at him. "Sorry you had to endure that." "It wasn't that bad." "You're a terrible liar." Daniel smiled. "Okay, it was pretty bad. But the food was decent." "The food was mediocre at best. Better than what I cook." They reached Daniel's truck. Victoria stopped, looking at it with an expression he couldn't read. "What?" he said. "Nothing. It's just very you." "Is that an insult?" "No, it's honest." She turned to face him fully. "Everything about you is honest. I like that." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. They stood there in the dim parking garage, the distant sound of traffic the only noise. "Thank you for coming tonight," Victoria said. "I know it was a lot." "You're welcome. Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you agree to come? You clearly hated the idea." Daniel considered lying, but Victoria was right. He was terrible at it. "Because you asked." "That's it?" "Yeah." Victoria looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then she stepped closer. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "I'm going to kiss you now. If that's okay." His heart stopped. "Okay." She rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, one hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss was soft, tentative, like she was asking a question. Daniel answered by wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her closer. The kiss deepened. Victoria's hand slid up to his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair, and Daniel forgot where they were.
forgot everything except the feel of her against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," she said. "Me too. This is a bad idea." "Probably. We're very different people." "I know. I don't do relationships well." "Neither do I." Victoria pulled back enough to look at him. "So what are we doing?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He just knew that walking away from this, from her, felt impossible. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm willing to find out." Victoria smiled, and it was the most genuine smile he'd seen from her yet. "Okay," she said. "Me too." After that night, things shifted. They still met for coffee on Wednesdays, but now there were also dinners on weekends when Daniel could get a sitter. Movies at Victoria's place, which turned out to be a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Quiet evenings where they'd sit on her couch and talk until midnight. It should have felt wrong, the disconnect between their lives. But somehow it didn't. Victoria never made him feel small for what he did or didn't have. She asked genuine questions about his work, remembered details about Sophie's life, laughed at his jokes even when they weren't that funny. And Daniel found himself wanting to know everything about her. Not just the polished CEO version, but the real person underneath. The woman who admitted she ate cereal for dinner when she was too tired to cook, who had a weakness for reality TV shows she was embarrassed to admit watching, who sometimes called him at midnight just to hear his voice because she couldn't sleep. 3 months in, Daniel knew he was in deep. He also knew he couldn't keep Victoria separate from the rest of his life much longer. Sophie had started asking more questions. Why did he go out so much now? Who was he texting all the time? When could she meet his friend? Claire was less subtle. "You need to introduce them," she said one Sunday while they were at their parents' house for dinner. She'd cornered him in the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room. Sophie should meet her. It's complicated. Why? Because what if it doesn't work out? Sophie's already had one person leave her. I'm not putting her through that again. So you're just never going to let her meet anyone you date? I don't know. Maybe. Claire crossed her arms. That's not fair to Sophie, or to Victoria. I'm trying to protect her. You're trying to protect yourself. Daniel glared at his sister, but she didn't back down. I'm serious, Danny. You can't live your whole life scared of getting hurt again. Sophie needs to see you taking risks. She needs to see what a healthy relationship looks like. And what if this isn't healthy? What if we're just two broken people who don't know what we're doing? Then you figure it out together, but you can't keep them in separate boxes forever. Daniel knew she was right. He'd known it for weeks now, but knowing something and doing something about it were different things. That Wednesday, he told Victoria about the conversation. They were at the coffee shop, their usual table, and Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. I understand why you're scared, she said finally. I am too. Of meeting Sophie? Of what it means if I do. Meeting your daughter makes this real. It means we're not just casually dating anymore. It means I'm becoming part of your life in a way that matters. And that scares you? Victoria looked down at her coffee. I don't have a great track record with relationships, Daniel. I work too much. I'm not warm and fuzzy. I don't know how to be around kids. Sophie's easy. She likes everyone. That's not the point. Victoria met his eyes. What if I'm not good at this? What if I disappoint her? Or you? You won't. You don't know that. No, Daniel admitted. But I know you. And I know you don't do anything halfway. If you're in this, you're in it. Victoria was quiet again, turning her cup in her hands. What do you want, Daniel? Really? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Daniel thought about the last 3 months, the way his chest felt lighter when he was with Victoria, the way she made him laugh, the way she challenged him to see beyond the narrow life he'd built for himself. He thought about Sophie asking when she could meet his friend, about the future he'd stopped letting himself imagine years ago. I want you to meet Sophie, he said. I want you to be part of my life. All of it, not just the parts that are easy. Even if I screw it up? Even then, Victoria took a breath. Okay. Yeah? Yeah, let's do it. They decided to keep it simple. Lunch at a diner Sophie liked. Nothing formal, no pressure, just 3 people having burgers and fries together. Daniel was more nervous than he'd been for any date. He picked Sophie up from school on Saturday and drove to the diner, trying not to let his anxiety show. "So I'm really meeting her?" Sophie asked from the back seat. "Yep." "What's she like?" "She's nice, smart, she works a lot." "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know. You can ask her." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Do you love her?" Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's a big question, Bug. But do you?" He didn't answer right away. He thought about Victoria's laugh, the way she held his hand, the text messages she sent in the middle of the day just to tell him something funny that had happened. "I think I might," he said quietly. Sophie nodded like this made perfect sense. "Okay." They pulled into the diner parking lot. Victoria's car was already there. Daniel took a deep breath. "You ready?" "Are you?" Sophie asked. "Smart kid." "Yeah," Daniel said. "I think I am." They walked inside together. Victoria was sitting in a booth by the window, and she stood up when she saw them, smoothing down her sweater. She looked nervous, which somehow made Daniel feel better. "Hi," Victoria said. "Hi," Daniel replied. "Victoria, this is Sophie." "Sophie, this is Victoria." Sophie looked up at Victoria with open curiosity. "You're pretty." Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Thank you. So are you." "Thanks. I like your sweater. Is it cashmere?" Daniel stifled a laugh. "Where'd you learn that word?" "Aunt Claire talks about fabric all the time." Sophie slid into the booth. "Do you really run a whole company?" "I do," Victoria said, sitting down across from her. "That's cool. What kind of company?" "We help other companies move things from one place to another. Logistics." Sophie wrinkled her nose. "That sounds boring." Victoria laughed, and it was genuine. "Sometimes it is." They ordered food, burgers for Sophie and Daniel, a salad for Victoria, and Sophie dominated the conversation, asking Victoria 100 questions. Did she have any pets? What was her favorite color? Had she ever been to Disney World? Did she know anything about velociraptors? Victoria answered each question patiently, and Daniel watched the two of them with something warm spreading through his chest. This was what he'd been afraid of, this moment right here, where two parts of his life came together, and he had to face what that meant. But sitting there, watching his daughter and the woman he was falling for talk about dinosaur facts, he realized the fear was worth it. "Dad spaces out sometimes," Sophie said, pulling Daniel back to the conversation. "Are you spacing out?" "No," Daniel said, "just listening." "He's lying. He does that when he's thinking too hard." Victoria smiled at him. "Does he?" "All the time." The food arrived and they ate while Sophie told Victoria about her school, her friends, the picture she'd drawn in art class that her teacher had hung on the wall. Victoria listened like every word mattered. When lunch was over and they walked back to the parking lot, Sophie tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "I like her," she whispered. "Yeah? Yeah, she's nice, and she didn't treat me like a baby." Daniel ruffled her hair. "Good." Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level. "It was really nice to meet you, Sophie." "You too. Can you come over sometime? We could watch a movie." Victoria glanced at Daniel, who nodded. "I'd like that," Victoria said. Sophie beamed. They said goodbye, and Daniel drove Sophie home, his daughter chattering the whole way about how cool Victoria was, and did he know she'd been to Paris, and could they go to Paris sometime? That night, after Sophie was in bed, Daniel called Victoria. "How do you think it went?" she asked immediately. "She loved you." "Really?" "Really. She's already planning your next hangout." Victoria let out a breath. "I was so nervous. I could tell. She's amazing, Daniel. You've done such a good job with her." "Thanks." They were quiet for a moment, and then Victoria said, "This is real now, isn't it?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "I think it is. I'm scared." "Me too. But I don't want to stop." "Neither do I." "Okay then," Victoria said softly. "Let's not." The weeks that followed felt almost normal, in a way that surprised Daniel. Victoria started coming over on Friday nights for movie marathons with Sophie, sitting on the worn couch in his small living room like she belonged there. She'd bring takeout, Thai food one week, pizza the next, and Sophie would curl up between them, arguing about which movie to watch. Victoria never complained about the cramped space or the mismatched furniture Daniel had cobbled together from thrift stores and hand-me-downs. She'd kick off her expensive shoes and tuck her feet under her, laughing at Sophie's running commentary during the films. Daniel would watch them sometimes, his daughter explaining plot holes to a billionaire CEO like she was the expert, and Victoria listening with genuine interest. It made something in his chest ache in a good way. But not everything was easy. Victoria's work consumed her in ways Daniel hadn't fully understood at first. She'd cancel plans last minute because of emergencies, show up an hour late looking exhausted, spend half their dinner checking her phone because some crisis needed immediate attention. Daniel tried to be understanding. He knew what it meant to work hard, to have responsibilities. But there were moments when he felt like he was competing with her company for her attention, and he hated feeling that way. It came to a head on a Saturday in late November. They'd planned to take Sophie to the Science Museum, something Sophie had been talking about all week. Victoria was supposed to pick them up at 10. By 10:30, she still hadn't shown. Daniel called. It went to voicemail. He texted. No response. Sophie sat on the couch in her jacket and shoes, her excitement slowly turning to disappointment. Maybe she forgot, Sophie said quietly. I'm sure she's just running late, Bug. But by 11, Daniel's patience was wearing thin. He called again. This time Victoria answered, and he could hear voices in the background. Daniel, I'm so sorry. Where are you? At the office. Something came up with the Henderson account, and I had to... We had plans, Victoria. I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to Sophie. I promise. Daniel looked at his daughter, who was trying very hard not to cry. Yeah, he said. Sure. He hung up before Victoria could say anything else. Sophie looked up at him. She's not coming? No, Bug, work stuff. Sophie nodded, blinking hard. That's okay. We can go just us. But the day was already ruined. They went to the museum, and Sophie tried to act excited, but Daniel could see the hurt in her eyes every time she looked at something cool and started to say, Victoria would like this, before stopping herself. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Victoria called. Daniel almost didn't answer. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I know I screwed up. Yeah, you did. The Henderson account is our second biggest client. If I'd lost them... I get it, Victoria. I do. But you made a promise to a 6-year-old. I said I'm sorry. What else do you want me to say? Daniel rubbed his eyes. I don't know. Maybe that this won't keep happening. I can't promise that. You know what my job is like. And you know I have a daughter who needs people to show up for her. Silence on the other end of the line. I'm trying, Daniel. I really am. But I can't just drop everything every time. I'm not asking you to drop everything. I'm asking you to show up when you say you will. That's it. That's not fair. What's not fair is watching my kid wait for someone who doesn't come. He heard Victoria take a sharp breath. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You're comparing me to her mother. That's what this is really about. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. Don't. It's true though, isn't it? You're scared I'm going to leave like she did, so you're looking for reasons to prove you're right. That's not... Daniel stopped. Maybe there was some truth to it. Maybe he was waiting for Victoria to disappoint him, to confirm what he'd always believed, that people left. I'm not doing this right now. Daniel, I need some space. I'll call you later. He hung up. For 3 days, they didn't talk. Daniel threw himself into work and taking care of Sophie, trying not to think about the hole Victoria's absence left. Sophie asked about her once, and Daniel said they were both busy, which was true enough. Claire called on the 3rd day. What did you do? She asked. Why do you assume I did something? Because Victoria called me crying, which means either you were an ass or she thinks you're going to break up with her. Daniel sat down heavily on the couch. She called you crying? Yes. What happened? He explained the museum situation. Claire listened without interrupting. Okay, she said when he finished. I get why you're mad, but Danny, you can't expect her to be perfect. I don't. Yes, you do. You're waiting for her to screw up so you can say, see, I knew this wouldn't work. That's what Victoria said. Then maybe you should listen. Daniel didn't want to admit they were right, but sitting there in his empty apartment, missing Victoria in a way that made his ribs feel too tight, he couldn't deny it anymore. He was scared, terrified actually, because he'd fallen in love with her, and love meant risk, and risk meant the possibility of getting hurt again. but pushing her away hurt too. He texted Victoria that night. "Can we talk?" Her response came immediately. Yes. They met at the coffee shop, their usual table. Victoria looked tired, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept well.
"Hi," she said. "Hi." They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. "I'm sorry," Daniel said finally, "for what I said. The thing about Sophie's mom, that wasn't fair." "You weren't entirely wrong, though." Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I did let her down, and I hate that I did." "I know you didn't mean to. That doesn't make it better." Victoria looked at him. "I'm not good at this, Daniel, at balancing everything. I've spent so long putting work first that I don't know how to do it any other way. I'm not asking you to quit your job or stop caring about it. I just need to know you care about this too. About us." "I do, more than you know." "Then show me. Not with expensive gifts or grand gestures. Just show up. Be present when you're here."
Victoria nodded slowly. "I can try, but you have to meet me halfway." "What does that mean?" "It means you have to stop waiting for me to fail. Stop comparing me to someone I'm not." She leaned forward. "I'm scared too, you know. I'm scared that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm not enough, that one day you'll realize you're better off without me. But I'm here anyway. I need you to be here too, not just physically, but actually here, trusting me." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. "I'm trying." "I know, so am I." They sat with that for a moment. "So where does that leave us?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. Where do you want it to leave us?" "I want to keep trying, if you do." Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. "I do." They didn't fix everything that day, but they made a start. December brought cold weather and the kind of busy that made Daniel's head spin. Work picked up as they tried to meet year-end quotas. Sophie had her school Christmas program. Victoria was drowning in end-of-year reports and budget meetings. But they made it work. Victoria came to Sophie's program sitting in the back of the elementary school auditorium in her work clothes because she'd come straight from the office. She recorded the whole thing on her phone and afterward told Sophie she was the best singing snowflake she'd ever seen. Sophie beamed for the rest of the night. Daniel started trying harder too. When Victoria had to work late, he'd bring her dinner at her office instead of getting frustrated. He'd sit in her conference room while she worked, not saying much, just being there. "You don't have to do this," Victoria said one night, looking up from her laptop. "I know. You could be home, with Sophie. She's at Claire's, and I want to be here." Victoria smiled, tired but genuine. "Thank you." Things weren't perfect. They still fought sometimes, about scheduling conflicts, about Daniel's tendency to shut down when he was upset, about Victoria's habit of trying to solve everything with money. But they fought fair, and they always came back to each other. Sophie was the bridge between their worlds in ways neither of them expected. She'd ask Victoria about business stuff with genuine curiosity, and Victoria would explain supply chains and logistics in terms a 6-year-old could understand. She'd tell Daniel about conversations she'd had with Victoria about science and books and places she wanted to travel. "Victoria says Paris has a museum that's just dinosaur bones," Sophie said one night at dinner. "Can we go there someday?" "Maybe when you're older, Bug." "Victoria says she'll take us. She's been there like 5 times. Daniel looked at his daughter, seeing the admiration in her eyes. Sophie had started talking about Victoria the way she talked about her teacher or Aunt Claire, like someone important, someone permanent. It should have made him happy. And it did. But it also scared the hell out of him. Because if this fell apart, it wasn't just his heart on the line anymore. In mid-December, Victoria invited them to a company holiday party. It was less formal than the gala, held at her office building's event space, with a casual dress code and activities for kids. "Are you sure?" Daniel asked when she brought it up. "Bringing your boyfriend and his kid to a work thing?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Boyfriend?" Daniel felt his face heat. "I mean, we haven't really labeled it, but—" "I like it," Victoria said, kissing him. "And yes, I'm sure. I want people to meet you, both of you." The party was overwhelming in the way all company events were. Too many people, too much noise, too much forced cheer. But Sophie loved it. There was a bounce house and a hot chocolate bar and a magician who did tricks that made her laugh. Victoria introduced them to her staff, her executives, the people she worked with every day. Daniel shook hands and made small talk, acutely aware that he was being evaluated. Victoria's boyfriend, the factory supervisor, the single dad. He caught some of the looks, the raised eyebrows, the whispered conversations. One of Victoria's vice presidents, a guy named Marcus with perfect teeth and a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's truck, pulled him aside near the bar. "So you're the one who got Victoria to actually take a weekend off," Marcus said. "That's impressive. We've been trying for years." Daniel wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a dig. "She works hard." That's one way to put it. Obsessive is another. Marcus sipped his drink. "Between you and me, I was starting to think she was married to this place. Good to see she has a life outside these walls." "Yeah," Marcus studied him. "You two are pretty different." "We are." "But it works?" Daniel looked across the room to where Victoria was kneeling next to Sophie, helping her make a gingerbread house. His daughter was explaining something with grand hand gestures, and Victoria was nodding seriously, like decorating cookies was the most important conversation she'd had all day. "Yeah," Daniel said, "it works." Later, when they were leaving, Sophie fell asleep in the car on the way home. Daniel carried her up to the apartment, and Victoria followed, helping him get Sophie into bed without waking her. They stood in Sophie's doorway for a moment, watching her sleep. "She had fun tonight," Victoria whispered. "She did. Your coworkers were nice. They were probably all wondering what you're doing with me." Victoria turned to look at him. "What I'm doing with you?" "Come on, Victoria. You saw how they looked at us. The CEO and the factory guy. It doesn't exactly make sense." "Who cares what makes sense?" "I'm just saying, no." Victoria's voice was firm. "I'm not doing this. I'm not letting you talk yourself into believing this is wrong just because some people don't understand it." Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "Don't you ever wonder, though, if you'd be better off with someone from your world? Someone who gets what you do, who can actually contribute to conversations about business?" "I have those people. I work with them every day. They bore me to death." Victoria took, "I'm serious. You know what those people want from me? Connections, opportunities, ways to advance their careers. You know what you want from me?" Daniel didn't answer. "You just want me," Victoria said softly. "Not my money, not my company, just me. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "I'm sure there are plenty of people who—" "There aren't." Victoria took his hand. "I've dated men who wanted to be seen with me because of what it said about them. I've been with people who thought I was some kind of prize to win. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like just being myself is enough." Daniel pulled her close. "It is enough. You're enough." She rested her head against his chest. "So are you. Stop trying to convince yourself otherwise." They moved to the living room, keeping their voices low. Victoria curled up on the couch, and Daniel sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Always." "What do you tell Sophie about me? About us?" Daniel thought about it. "I tell her you're important to me, that I care about you." "Do you tell her you love me?" The question hung in the air between them. Daniel had been avoiding those words. They felt too big, too final. Saying them out loud made everything real in a way that scared him. But sitting there with Victoria in his arms, in the apartment he shared with his daughter, he realized the fear didn't matter anymore. "I haven't," he said, "but I should have, because I do." Victoria lifted her head to look at him. "You do what?" "Love you. I love you." Her eyes filled with tears. "You mean that?" "Yeah, I do." "I love you too," Victoria said, her voice breaking slightly. "I have for a while now. I was just scared to say it." "Why?" "Because the last time I told someone I loved them, they made me feel like I had to choose between them and everything else I cared about. Like love meant making myself smaller." Daniel cupped her face in his hands. "I would never ask you to do that." "I know. That's why I love you." They kissed, slow and sweet, and Daniel felt something settle inside him. Something that had been jagged and uncertain for years finally smoothing out. This was real. This was happening. And maybe, just maybe, it was going to be okay. The week before Christmas, everything fell apart. Daniel was at work when Victoria called, and he knew immediately something was wrong. Her voice was off, too controlled, like she was forcing herself to stay calm. "Can you meet me for lunch?" she asked. Is everything okay? Just, can you meet me? They met at the coffee shop. Victoria was already there, staring at nothing, her coffee untouched in front of her. Daniel sat down. What happened? I ran into Marcus yesterday at the Riverside Hotel. It took Daniel a second to place the name. Victoria's vice president, the guy from the holiday party. Okay? He wasn't alone. Victoria's jaw tightened. He was with my ex, Richard. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Victoria never talked about her ex. All he knew was that the relationship had ended badly and left her gun-shy about dating. What was Marcus doing with him? I don't know. They were having lunch. They saw me and... Victoria stopped, taking a breath. Richard came over, asked how I'd been, told me I looked good. Like we were old friends instead of... Instead of what? Victoria looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked small, vulnerable in a way that made Daniel want to hit something. He was charming, she said quietly. That was always his thing, charming and successful and everything I thought I was supposed to want. And then I wasn't enough for him. Victoria. He used to tell me I was too cold, too focused on work, that I cared more about contracts than I did about him. She laughed, but it sounded broken. And the worst part is he wasn't entirely wrong. I did work too much. I did put the company first, because it was the only thing I knew I couldn't fail at. Daniel reached for her hand. What did he say to you yesterday? He asked if I was still married to my work, if I'd learned to let someone in yet. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. And I wanted to tell him yes, that I had, that I'd found someone who actually gave a damn about me. But I just stood there like an idiot, and he smiled like he knew exactly what I was thinking. Which was? That maybe he was right. Maybe I haven't changed at all. Maybe I'm still that person who can't balance anything, who disappoints everyone eventually. That's not true. Isn't it? I blew off Sophie for a work meeting. I cancel plans all the time. I'm exactly who I've always been. No, Daniel said firmly. You're not. You show up now. You try. That matters. Does it? Because I feel like I'm failing at everything. At work, because I'm distracted thinking about you and Sophie. At this, because I can't give you the time you deserve. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He recognized this spiral. He'd been in it himself enough times. The voice that told you that you weren't enough, that you were broken, that everyone would be better off without you. Look at me, he said. Victoria did, her eyes red. Richard was wrong about you. Whatever he said, whatever he made you feel, he was wrong. You're not too cold or too focused. You're driven and passionate, and you care so damn much about everything you do. That's not a flaw. That's who you are. But what if I can't be that person and also be what you need? What Sophie needs? You already are what we need. How can you say that? You've seen me mess up. I've seen you show up at an elementary school concert after working 12 hours because you promised Sophie you'd be there. I've seen you explain logistics to a 6-year-old like her questions matter. I've seen you try so hard to be part of our lives, even though it scares you. Daniel squeezed her hand. I don't need you to be perfect, Victoria. I just need you to be here. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know if I can do this. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Do what? This. Us. I keep waiting for you to realize I'm not worth the effort, that you'd be better off with someone simpler, someone who fits into your life instead of complicating it. You don't complicate my life. You make it better. Do I? Or do I just make it harder? Daniel felt panic rising in his throat. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading, the moment she left. Don't do this, he said. Don't run because you're scared. I'm not running. I'm being realistic. No, you're letting one asshole from your past convince you that you're not good enough. That's not realistic. That's just fear. Victoria pulled her hand away. Maybe fear is smart. Maybe it's protecting both of us from something that was never going to work anyway. I don't believe that. And neither do you. How do you know what I believe? Because I know you, Daniel said, his voice rising. I know you're terrified of failing at this, like you think you failed at that. I know you'd rather walk away now than risk me leaving later. But I'm not him, Victoria. I'm not going to make you choose between me and everything else you care about. You say that now. I'll say it forever, if that's what it takes for you to believe me. Victoria stood up abruptly. I need some time. Time for what? To think. To figure out if I can actually do this. Daniel stood too, his heart hammering. How much time? I don't know. She grabbed her coat and walked out, leaving Daniel standing there in the middle of the coffee shop, feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under him. He tried calling her that night. It went to voicemail. He texted. No response. By the third day, Claire was pounding on his door. What did you do? She demanded the second he opened it. Why does everyone assume I did something? Because Victoria won't answer my calls and you look like death. What happened? Daniel let her in and explained everything. Claire listened, her expression growing more concerned. She's spiraling, Claire said when he finished. I know. So go fix it. How? She won't talk to me. Then make her talk to you. Show up at her office, camp out on her doorstep, do something. She said she needs time. She doesn't need time. She needs someone to prove to her that she's worth fighting for. Claire grabbed his shoulders. Don't let her push you away, Danny. She's doing exactly what you do, sabotaging something good because she's scared of getting hurt. Daniel knew she was right, but the thought of pushing Victoria when she'd asked for space felt wrong. What if she really wants me to leave her alone? Then she'll tell you, but you won't know unless you try. That night, Daniel drove to Victoria's building. He knew she was still there. Her car was in the garage and the lights in her office were on. He took the elevator up to the top floor. Her assistant had gone home hours ago. Daniel walked down the empty hallway and knocked on her office door. No answer. He knocked again. Victoria, I know you're in there. Silence. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. More silence. Daniel leaned against the wall and slid down to sit on the floor. Okay, I'll wait. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the door opened. Victoria stood there, looking exhausted and beautiful, and so guarded it made Daniel's chest ache. You shouldn't be here, she said. Probably not, but here I am. Daniel. Just hear me out, please. Victoria hesitated, then stepped back to let him in. Her office was a mess. Papers everywhere. Coffee cups scattered across the desk. She'd clearly been working herself to death for days. You look terrible, Daniel said. Thanks. I mean it. When's the last time you slept? I don't know. Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Victoria crossed her arms, defensive. I thought you came here to talk, not lecture me about self-care. I came here to tell you I love you, and that I'm not giving up on us just because you're scared. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're making it complicated because complicated feels safer than admitting you want this. Victoria's expression cracked slightly. You don't understand. Then help me understand. She turned away, staring out the window at the city lights below. When Richard left, he told me I'd never be able to give someone what they needed, that I was too damaged, too focused on proving myself. And I believed him. I've spent 8 years believing him. Daniel moved closer but didn't touch her. He was wrong. Was he? Look at me, Daniel. I'm 30 years old and I've never had a relationship that lasted longer than a year. I've built an empire, but I can't figure out how to build a life. What does that say about me? It says you haven't found the right person yet. Or it says I'm fundamentally broken. You're not broken, Daniel said quietly. You're just human. We all are. Victoria turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. I'm so tired of being strong all the time, of having to prove I'm good enough. I just want... She broke off, covering her face with her hands. Daniel closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for half a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you. They stood there for a long time, Victoria crying and Daniel holding her, until finally her breathing evened out. I'm sorry, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Don't be. I'm a mess. So am I. We'll figure it out. Victoria pulled back enough to look at him. How can you be so sure? Because I love you. And because I think you love me too. That's enough to start with. What if it's not? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I'm not walking away just because it might be hard. I'm in this, Victoria, all the way. I just need to know if you are too. Victoria searched his face and Daniel held his breath, waiting. I'm terrified, she whispered. I know. But I don't want to lose you. You won't. How do you know? Because I'm standing here, aren't I? Even after you tried to push me away. Even after you ignored my calls. I'm still here. And I'm not going anywhere. Victoria kissed him then, desperate and messy and full of everything she couldn't say out loud. When they broke apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he said. "What?" "Tonight. Come home with me. Stop hiding in this office and come be with us. It's late. Sophie's probably asleep. She'll want to see you in the morning, and so will I." Victoria hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They drove separately to Daniel's apartment. Victoria followed him up the stairs, and he half expected her to change her mind and leave. But she didn't. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Daniel checked on Sophie, still asleep, then turned to find Victoria standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost. "You can stay here," he said, gesturing to the couch. "Or, with you," Victoria said, "if that's okay." "Yeah, of course." They got ready for bed in comfortable silence. Victoria borrowed one of Daniel's t-shirts, and he tried not to think about how right she looked wearing it. In bed, she curled against him, and Daniel wrapped his arms around her, feeling her gradually relax. "Thank you," she said into the darkness. "For what?" "For not letting me run." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Always." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and for the first time in days, Daniel felt like he could breathe again. Daniel woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented second, he didn't remember falling asleep with Victoria in his arms. Then he rolled over and found her side of the bed empty, the sheets still warm. He sat up, listening. Voices drifted from the kitchen, one high and animated, the other lower and uncertain. Sophie and Victoria. Daniel pulled on sweatpants and walked out to find them sitting at the small kitchen table. Sophie was still in her pajamas, explaining something with grand hand gestures while Victoria listened, cradling a coffee mug like a lifeline. She was still wearing his t-shirt, her hair messy, no makeup. She looked more human than he'd ever seen her. And then the T-Rex was like Roar, but the Triceratops had the horns so it could defend itself, Sophie was saying. But Dad says the T-Rex would probably win because it was bigger. I don't know, Victoria said thoughtfully. The Triceratops had armor. That counts for something. Sophie's eyes lit up. That's what I said. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching them. Victoria caught his eye and smiled, a real smile that made his chest feel tight. Morning, she said. Morning. You made coffee? I found your stash. Hope that's okay. More than okay? Sophie bounced in her seat. Victoria says she'll make us pancakes, the fancy kind with blueberries. Daniel raised an eyebrow at Victoria. You cook? I can manage pancakes, probably. She's never made them before, Sophie stage whispered. But I said I'd help. The pancakes turned out lopsided and slightly burned, but Sophie declared them the best she'd ever had. They ate at the cramped table, knees bumping, syrup getting everywhere, and Daniel couldn't remember the last time his apartment had felt this full. After breakfast, Sophie dragged Victoria to her room to show her the dinosaur collection while Daniel cleaned up. He could hear them through the thin walls, Sophie's excited explanations, Victoria's genuine questions. Something in his chest settled. A piece he hadn't known was missing, clicking into place. Later, after Sophie got distracted by cartoons, Victoria found Daniel in the kitchen putting away dishes. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For last night. For this morning. For not giving up on me when I was being impossible. Daniel dried his hands and turned to face her. You weren't being impossible. You were scared. I'm still scared. Me too. Victoria stepped closer, wrapping her arms around his waist. I don't want to mess this up. Then don't. It's not that simple. Sure it is. We just keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing this, even when it's hard. Victoria rested her head against his chest. You make it sound easy. It's not, but it's worth it. They stood there for a moment, the sound of cartoons playing in the other room, morning light filtering through the window. I need to go home and change, Victoria said eventually, and deal with work. But I'll come back tonight if that's okay. Yeah, we'd like that. She kissed him, soft and sweet, then went to say goodbye to Sophie. Daniel watched her leave, and for the first time in days, he felt like they were going to be okay. The days leading up to Christmas were chaos. Daniel worked overtime to meet production deadlines. Sophie had the kind of pre-holiday energy that made her bounce off walls. Victoria was swamped with year-end reports and budget meetings that had her working 16-hour days. But they made time. Stolen moments that added up to something real. Victoria started keeping clothes at Daniel's apartment. Nothing fancy, just jeans and sweaters and the comfortable things she never wore to the office. She'd show up late at night, exhausted and stressed, and Daniel would make her tea while Sophie told her about her day. Those quiet evenings became the anchor of their week. On December 23rd, Victoria showed up at the apartment with bags of groceries. "What's all this?" Daniel asked, helping her carry them in. "Ingredients. I'm cooking Christmas dinner." "You cook Christmas dinner?" "I'm going to try, unless you had other plans." Daniel had planned to do what he did every year, microwave a turkey breast and make box stuffing, while Sophie complained that it wasn't as good as Grandma's. The idea of an actual home-cooked meal sounded almost foreign. "No plans," he said. "But you don't have to." "I want to." Victoria started unpacking vegetables and spices. "My mom used to make this whole spread when I was a kid, before she died. I haven't done it in years, but I remember most of the recipes." Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Your mom died?" Victoria paused, then nodded. "When I was 15. "That's sad." "Yeah, it was." Sophie walked over and hugged Victoria's leg, the way she did when Daniel was upset about something. Victoria looked startled for a second, then bent down to hug her back properly. "It's okay," Sophie said seriously. "You can have Christmas with us now." Victoria's eyes got bright. "Thank you, sweetheart." Daniel watched them, his throat tight. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not traditional, just people choosing to show up for each other. Christmas Eve arrived with snow that actually stuck to the ground, rare for their part of the state. Sophie pressed her nose to the window, watching the flakes fall. "Can we build a snowman?" she asked. "It's not deep enough yet, Bug, but it might be tomorrow." "Maybe." Victoria came over that evening with wrapped presents that she tried to hide from Sophie's prying eyes. They ordered Chinese food and watched Christmas movies until Sophie fell asleep on the couch between them. Daniel carried her to bed while Victoria cleaned up the takeout containers. When he came back, she was standing by the window, looking out at the snow. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "How different this is from last Christmas. I worked through the whole thing, didn't even notice the day had passed until someone mentioned it at the office." She turned to look at him. "This is better. Even with the chaos and the mess and the kid who asks a million questions, especially because of that." Daniel pulled her close. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." They stood there in the quiet apartment, watching snow fall outside. And Daniel let himself believe this could last. Christmas morning was loud and messy and perfect. Sophie woke them up at 6, bouncing on the bed until they gave in and stumbled out to the living room. Victoria had gone all out with presents. Art supplies for Sophie, a new winter coat for Daniel that actually fit properly, books and games and little things that showed she'd been paying attention to what they liked. Daniel felt guilty about his gifts in comparison. A scarf he'd picked up at the mall, a framed photo of the three of them from the holiday party. But Victoria held that photo like it was precious, her fingers tracing the frame. "I love it," she said. "It's just a picture." "No, it's proof that this is real, that I'm part of something." She kissed him. "Thank you." After presents, Victoria took over the kitchen with a determination that was both impressive and slightly terrifying. She'd printed out recipes and arranged ingredients with the same precision she used for business meetings. "You sure you don't want help?" Daniel asked. "I've got this." "You've been staring at that turkey for 5 minutes." "I'm strategizing." Sophie giggled from where she was playing with her new art set. "She doesn't know what she's doing." "I heard that," Victoria called. "And you're not wrong, but I'm trying." The cooking took all day. There were minor disasters: burned rolls, lumpy gravy, mashed potatoes that were somehow both too dry and too wet. But the turkey came out perfect, golden and juicy. And the green beans were actually good. They sat down to eat at the small table that barely fit 3 people, and Sophie said it was the best Christmas dinner ever. "Even better than Grandma's?" Daniel asked. Sophie considered this seriously. "Different, but good different." Victoria looked like she might cry. After dinner, they played the board games Victoria had brought. Sophie won at Candyland 3 times in a row, doing a victory dance each time that made them both laugh. They watched more movies, ate too many cookies, and by the time Sophie finally crashed around 8, they were all exhausted. Daniel tucked Sophie in while Victoria cleaned up the wrapping paper and plates. When he came back, she was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her. "You okay?"
I was just thinking about my dad. Daniel waited. Victoria rarely talked about her family. He died when I was 22. Heart attack. Completely unexpected. She picked at a loose thread on the couch. He'd built this company from nothing, and suddenly it was mine. I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrified I was going to destroy everything he'd worked for. But you didn't. No. But I also didn't let myself have anything else. I threw everything into the company because it was the only thing that made sense, the only thing I could control. She looked at him. I haven't let myself want something like this in a long time. Like what? A family, a home, someone who sees me and doesn't want something from me. Daniel took her hand. I see you. I know, that's what scares me. Why?
Because what if I lose it? What if I mess up so badly you realize I'm not worth the trouble? That's not going to happen. You can't know that. No, Daniel admitted, but I can choose to believe it anyway. Victoria leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. Can I tell you something? She said eventually. Always. I've been thinking about scaling back at work. Not quitting, but delegating more. Giving myself actual time off. Daniel sat up straighter. Really? I have good people. I should trust them more. And I want to be present for this. For you and Sophie. Not just showing up, but actually being here. That's a big change. I know, but I think it's time. She looked at him. Is that okay? Me being around more? Daniel kissed her forehead. More than okay. The week between Christmas and New Year's was quiet. Daniel had time off from work, and Victoria actually took vacation days, something her assistant apparently nearly fainted over. They fell into a routine that felt natural. Mornings with coffee and Sophie's chatter, afternoons at the park or the library, or just staying in, evenings watching movies or playing games, or talking after Sophie went to bed. It was domestic and ordinary and everything Daniel had stopped letting himself want. On New Year's Eve, Claire insisted on taking Sophie for the night so Daniel and Victoria could go out. Have an actual adult evening, Claire said. You've earned it. They went to dinner at a restaurant that wasn't too fancy but wasn't cheap either, a middle ground they were getting better at finding. They talked about work and Sophie and plans for the new year. I want to take a real vacation, Victoria said. Somewhere warm, the three of us. Sophie would love that. What about you?
I've never been on a real vacation.
Victoria blinked. Never?
Never had the time or the money.
Then we're definitely doing it. I'll start looking at options. After dinner, they walked through downtown, watching people prepare for the midnight celebrations. The streets were crowded with couples and groups of friends, everyone in good spirits despite the cold. They ended up at the waterfront, away from the crowds, watching the city lights reflect off the dark water. This time last year, I was alone in my apartment with a bottle of wine and a pile of reports, Victoria said. I didn't even realize it was New Year's until someone set off fireworks at midnight and scared the hell out of me. Daniel laughed. I was probably passed out on the couch. Sophie has to stay up until midnight, but I never make it. We're quite the pair. Yeah, we are. Victoria turned to face him, her expression serious. I want this to work, Daniel. I know I've been difficult and scared and probably a pain in the ass to deal with. You haven't... Let me finish. She took a breath. I want to do better, be better. Not because I think I'm not good enough, but because you and Sophie deserve someone who's all in. And I am. I'm all in. Daniel cupped her face in his hands. I know you are. How? Because you're here. Because you spent a week learning to cook just so Sophie could have a real Christmas dinner. Because you fought through every fear and insecurity to let us in. That's not someone who's halfway committed. Victoria kissed him as fireworks started going off somewhere in the distance. People around them cheered, counting down to midnight. But Daniel barely noticed. He was too focused on the woman in his arms, on the way she held on to him like he was solid ground. When they broke apart, Victoria was smiling. Happy New Year, she said. Happy New Year. They walked back to Daniel's apartment hand in hand, and he felt lighter than he had in years. January brought cold weather and the return to normal life. Daniel went back to work. Sophie started the second half of the first grade. Victoria dove back into the company, but she kept her promise. She delegated more, left the office at reasonable hours, actually took weekends off. It wasn't perfect. There were still fights about scheduling and miscommunications and moments when the differences in their lives felt too big to bridge. But they worked through it. Victoria started coming to Sunday dinners at Daniel's parents' house. His mom loved her immediately. His dad was more reserved, clearly trying to figure out what a woman like her saw in his son. But he warmed up when Victoria asked his advice about a supplier contract and actually listened to his suggestions. Sophie started calling her Vicky, a nickname Victoria claimed to hate but secretly loved. "You're part of the family now?" Claire told Victoria one Sunday while they were clearing dishes. "That means you're stuck with us." Victoria laughed. "I think I can live with that." One evening in late January, Daniel came home from work to find Victoria in the kitchen, looking nervous. "Hey," he said, setting down his keys. "Where's Sophie?" "At your mom's. I asked if she could watch her tonight."
Why? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to talk to you about something. Daniel's stomach dropped. Those words never led anywhere good. They sat on the couch, and Victoria took his hand. "I've been thinking about the future," she said. "Okay." "About what I want, what we're building." She took a breath. "I want this to be permanent, Daniel. Not just dating, not just spending time together. I want us to be a real family." "We are a real family. I mean, officially. I want to—" She stopped, seeming to gather courage. "I want to move in, with you and Sophie." Daniel stared at her. "You want to move in here? Or we could find a bigger place, somewhere that fits all of us. I know this apartment is small and you're comfortable here, but—" "Victoria, slow down." She did, looking anxious. "Is that a no?" "It's not a no, it's just, are you sure? You have that amazing penthouse. This place is barely 1,000 square feet.
"I don't care about the penthouse. I care about being with you, both of you." Victoria squeezed his hand. "I'm tired of going home to an empty apartment every night. I'm tired of pretending this is casual when it's the most important thing in my life. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to be there when Sophie needs help with homework. I want this to be my home." Daniel felt his throat get tight. "What about work? Your commute would be twice as long from here. Then we find a place that's closer to both our jobs. Or I deal with the commute. I don't care, Daniel. I just want to be with you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, move in with us. Let's find a place together. Let's do this right." Victoria pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "Really? Really?" She kissed him, hard and desperate and full of relief. When they broke apart, she was laughing. "Sophie's going to flip," she said. "She's going to demand we get a house with a yard so she can get a dog." "I'm okay with that." "Are you? A dog?" Victoria shrugged. "Why not? I'm already all in. Might as well go all the way." They told Sophie the next day. As predicted, she immediately started lobbying for a dog, a cat, and maybe some fish too while they were at it. "We'll see, Bug," Daniel said. "That means yes." Sophie hugged Victoria around the waist. "Are you really going to live with us?" "If that's okay with you." "Are you kidding? This is the best thing ever." They started house hunting the following week. It was a strange process. Victoria wanted to buy, Daniel wanted to rent, and they compromised on a lease with an option to purchase. Victoria wanted something modern and efficient. Daniel wanted something with character. Sophie wanted a yard and didn't care about anything else. After looking at 24 places, they found it. A 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood halfway between Daniel's work and Victoria's office. It had hardwood floors that needed refinishing, a kitchen that was outdated but functional, and a backyard with an old oak tree perfect for climbing. "It needs work," the realtor said apologetically. "It's perfect," Victoria said. Daniel looked at her. "You sure? We could keep looking." "No, this is it. I can feel it." Sophie was already running through the empty rooms, her voice echoing off the walls. "This one's mine. Dad! Victoria, come look. It has a window seat." They signed the lease that week. Moving day was chaos. Victoria hired movers for her stuff, but Daniel insisted on doing his own. Claire showed up with their parents to help. Even some of Daniel's coworkers came by with pizza and beer. Victoria's expensive furniture looked ridiculous next to Daniel's thrift store finds, but somehow it worked. They made it work. That first night in the new house, they ordered takeout and ate sitting on the floor of the empty living room because they hadn't unpacked the table yet. Sophie fell asleep in a nest of blankets, exhausted from running around all day. Daniel and Victoria sat with their backs against the wall, shoulders touching. "We did it," Victoria said. "Yeah, we did."
"It's really happening. Getting cold feet?" "No. Just realizing how much my life has changed in less than a year." Daniel took her hand. "Good change." "The best change." Victoria rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you. I love you too." They sat there in the quiet house, surrounded by boxes and possibility, and Daniel felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope.
The next few weeks were an adjustment. Learning to live together full-time meant navigating quirks and habits they'd only glimpsed before. Victoria was obsessively organized and liked things in specific places. Daniel was more relaxed and left coffee cups everywhere. Sophie was thrilled to have Victoria around all the time and constantly wanted her attention. They fought about stupid things: who forgot to buy milk, why the thermostat was set so high, whose turn it was to do dishes. But they also figured out rhythms, morning routines, evening rituals, the small compromises that made a house feel like a home. One Saturday in early February, Daniel woke to an empty bed. He found Victoria and Sophie in the kitchen, making pancakes together. They'd gotten better at it. The pancakes were only slightly lopsided now.
"Morning," Victoria said, flipping one. "We're making breakfast." "I can see that." Sophie grinned at him, her face smudged with flour. "Victoria says we can get a dog if we prove we're responsible." "Did she now?" "Don't look at me like that," Victoria said. "She wore me down." "She's 6. She's supposed to wear you down." "Well, it worked, so if we can handle taking care of each other for a month without any major disasters, we'll start looking at shelters." Sophie cheered and nearly knocked over the mixing bowl. After breakfast, they drove to the hardware store to buy paint for Sophie's room. She wanted purple walls, and Victoria had suggested they make a day of it, paint together, make a mess, create something. At the store, while Sophie was distracted by paint samples, Victoria pulled Daniel aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, and there was something in her voice that made his stomach flip. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just—" She took a breath. "Marcus called yesterday. He's leaving the company, moving to Seattle for his wife's job." "Okay. Is that a problem?" "It means I need a new VP of operations, someone I trust completely." "You'll find someone. I already have someone in mind." Victoria looked at him. "But I wanted to run it by you first because it's going to mean more work for a while. Longer hours until we get someone fully trained. I know we just made all these promises about balance, and I don't want to—" Daniel took her hand. "It's okay. Do what you need to do. We'll figure it out." "You sure?" "Yeah, you've been making sacrifices for us. Let us support you too." Victoria hugged him right there in the paint aisle, and Daniel held her, feeling the weight of what they were building. This was partnership. This was real. That night, covered in purple paint and exhausted, they tucked Sophie into her sleeping bag in the living room since her room was drying. "Best day ever," Sophie mumbled, already half asleep. Daniel and Victoria retreated to their room, collapsing onto the bed. "I'm getting too old for this," Daniel said. "You're 32. "I feel 50. Victoria laughed, curling into his side. "Thank you for today." "For what?" "I barely did anything." "For being here. For letting me be part of this. For not making me feel like I have to choose between work and family." "You don't. You get both." "I know. But I've spent so long thinking I couldn't that sometimes I forget it's allowed." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "It's allowed. All of it." They fell asleep like that, the house quiet around them, and Daniel thought about how far they'd come. From a blind date, neither wanted to attend to this. A home, a family, a future. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and sometimes hard. But it was theirs. And that was enough. Spring came slowly that year, winter refusing to let go until mid-March. But when it finally arrived, it brought warmth and the kind of light that made everything feel possible. Victoria settled into her new role,
not just as Daniel's partner, but as a parent figure to Sophie. She learned to French braid hair through YouTube tutorials, showed up to parent-teacher conferences, and had heated debates with Sophie about whether velociraptors or T-Rexes were cooler. She still worked long hours sometimes, but she came home. Always came home. Daniel watched her transformation with something close to awe. The woman who'd been so certain she couldn't balance work and family was doing exactly that. Imperfectly, messily, but genuinely. They got the dog in April. A rescue mutt named Cooper, who was part lab, part something else entirely, and completely devoted to Sophie from day one. Victoria pretended to be annoyed when Cooper tracked mud through the house, but Daniel caught her slipping the dog treats when she thought no one was looking. "You're getting soft," he teased one evening while they were cleaning up after dinner. "I am not." "You let Sophie stay up late on a school night last week to finish her art project." "That was different. She was being responsible. And you bought her those expensive colored pencils she wanted. She's artistically gifted. She needs proper materials." Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "It's okay to admit you love this. Being part of a family." Victoria turned in his arms. "I do love it. Even the chaos and the mess and the dog hair everywhere. Even the burnt pancakes. Especially the burnt pancakes." They kissed, slow and comfortable, the kind of kiss that came from knowing someone completely. Life fell into a rhythm. Daniel got a promotion at work, assistant plant manager, with a raise that made the budget a little less tight. Victoria brought in a new VP of operations, a woman named Sarah, who was competent and trustworthy enough that Victoria could actually take full weekends off. Sophie thrived. Her grades were good, her confidence growing every day. She talked about Victoria like she'd always been there, like the early days when it was just her and Daniel were some distant memory. Sometimes Daniel wondered if that was healthy, if Sophie was getting too attached, but then he'd see them together, Victoria helping with homework or teaching Sophie to cook, and he'd push the worry aside. This was what family looked like. Sophie deserved this. They all did. In late May, Claire cornered Daniel at his parents' house during Sunday dinner. "So when are you going to propose?" she asked, not even pretending to be subtle. Daniel nearly choked on his beer. "What? Don't play dumb. You've been together almost a year. You live together. She's basically Sophie's mom at this point. When are you making it official?" We haven't talked about marriage." "Why not?" "Because it's complicated." "How is it complicated? You love her. She loves you. You're already building a life together." Daniel set down his beer. "What if she doesn't want to get married? She's got her company, her independence. Why would she want to tie herself down legally? Have you asked her?" "No." "Then how do you know?" "Claire, I'm serious, Danny. Stop assuming you know what she wants and actually talk to her." Daniel wanted to argue, but his sister had a point. He'd been thinking about proposing for months now. He'd even looked at rings online, though he had no idea what Victoria would like or if she'd even want one. The truth was, he was scared. Scared she'd say no. Scared she'd feel pressured. Scared he'd somehow ruin the good thing they had by wanting more. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel found Victoria on the back porch. She was sitting on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her. "What are you doing out here?" "Just thinking." "About?" "Work stuff, life stuff." She glanced at him. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "Yeah, of course. Why?" "I don't know. Sometimes I worry that this isn't enough for you, that you wanted something different." "Different how?" "Someone simpler. Someone who's around more. Someone who doesn't bring work stress home or forget to grocery shop because they were stuck in meetings all day." Daniel took her hand. "I don't want different. I want you. Even with all my flaws? Especially with your flaws. They're what make you real." Victoria smiled, but there was still something uncertain in her expression. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever think about the future, like long-term future?" Daniel's heart started beating faster. "Sometimes. Why?" "Because I do. I think about it a lot, actually." She turned to face him fully. "I think about Sophie graduating high school, going to college. I think about us getting old together. I think about all the moments I want to be there for. And what do you want from those moments?" "I want them to be ours. All of us. Officially." Victoria took a breath.
I want to marry you, Daniel. For a second, Daniel forgot how to form words. You want to marry me? Yes. I know it's probably not traditional for me to bring it up, but I've never been good at waiting for things I want. And I want this. I want us to be a family in every possible way. Daniel felt something break open in his chest, relief and joy and disbelief all at once. I was going to ask you, he said. Victoria blinked. What? I've been thinking about proposing for months. I even looked at rings. I just didn't know if you'd want to get married. Are you serious? Yeah, I was terrified you'd say no. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and surprised. So we're both idiots? Apparently. She kissed him, her hands cupping his face, and when they broke apart, they were both grinning. So is that a yes? Victoria asked. You'll marry me? On one condition. What? Let me actually propose. The right way. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You want to do the whole traditional thing? I want Sophie to be part of it. I want her to know this isn't just about you and me. It's about all of us becoming a family. Victoria's eyes got bright. Okay, but don't take too long. I'm not patient. I know. They sat on the porch steps, wrapped in the blanket, planning a future that felt suddenly, beautifully certain. Daniel spent the next 2 weeks planning. He enlisted Claire's help picking out a ring, something simple but elegant, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds because Victoria had once mentioned she thought sapphires were prettier than traditional stones. The hardest part was keeping the secret from Sophie, who had a sixth sense for when her dad was up to something. You're being weird, she said one morning while they were making breakfast. I'm not being weird. Yes, you are. You keep smiling at your phone. I'm just happy. Because of Victoria? Yeah, Bug. Because of Victoria. Sophie grinned. She makes you happy. That's good. Daniel ruffled her hair. She makes both of us happy. He waited until the first weekend of June. They'd planned a picnic in the park, Sophie's idea, though Daniel had encouraged it. The weather was perfect, warm but not too hot, with a breeze that rustled the leaves overhead. They spread out a blanket under a big oak tree. Victoria had packed sandwiches and fruit and the cookies she and Sophie had made the night before. Cooper sprawled in the grass, panting happily. After they ate, Sophie ran off to play on the nearby playground, Cooper trailing after her. Daniel watched her go, then turned to Victoria. I have something for you, he said. Oh yeah, what's that? What's? His hands were shaking as he pulled the small box from his pocket. He'd rehearsed this a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, all his planned words vanished. Victoria's eyes went wide when she saw the box. Daniel, let me say this before I lose my nerve. He opened the box, revealing the ring. I know I'm not the obvious choice for someone like you. I don't have money or status or any of the things people probably think you should want, but I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You make me want to be better. You make our home feel full. You make Sophie light up every time you walk in the door. Victoria's hand covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. I know we've already talked about this, and I know you kind of beat me to it, but I wanted to do this right. Daniel took a breath. Victoria Hale, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you that you're worth everything, that you deserve all the love and happiness and burnt pancakes we can give you? Victoria laughed through her tears. Yes, of course, yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like salt and joy. When they broke apart, Sophie was standing a few feet away, Cooper sitting beside her. Did you ask her? Sophie demanded. Yeah, Bug. I asked her. And she said yes? Victoria held out her hand, showing Sophie the ring. I said yes. Sophie whooped and launched herself at both of them, nearly knocking them over. Cooper barked, caught up in the excitement, and for a moment it was just chaos, laughing and hugging and the dog trying to lick everyone's face. When they finally settled down, Sophie looked between them seriously. So does this mean Victoria is going to be my real mom? Victoria's breath caught. Daniel saw the fear flash across her face, the same fear he'd seen that first night at the restaurant, the terror of not being enough. He squeezed her hand. If that's what you want, Bug, Daniel said carefully. Sophie looked at Victoria. Is it what you want? Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level, her voice thick with emotion. More than anything, if you'll have me. Sophie threw her arms around Victoria's neck.
I've wanted a mom forever. I'm glad it's you. Victoria held her, crying openly now, and Daniel watched his two favorite people cling to each other and felt complete in a way he'd never experienced before. This was it. This was everything. The engagement shifted something, not in any dramatic way, but in the small moments that added up to something real. Victoria started planning the wedding with the same intensity she brought to work, while Daniel mostly nodded and agreed to whatever she suggested. "You're being too easy about this," she said one night while looking at venue options on her laptop. "I just want to marry you. I don't care where it happens. We could elope. Sophie would kill us." Victoria laughed. "True. She's already planning her flower girl dress." They settled on a small ceremony in late summer. Immediate family only in the backyard of their house. Nothing fancy, just the people who mattered. But before the wedding could happen, Daniel got a call that stopped his world. It was a Thursday afternoon. He was at work, going over production schedules, when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello? Is this Daniel Hayes?" "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Patricia Miller. I'm a social worker with Child Services. I'm calling about Sophie's mother, Erica." Daniel's blood went cold. "What about her?" "She's requested contact with Sophie. She claims she's been sober for 2 years and wants to reconnect with her daughter." The world tilted. Daniel sat down hard in his chair. "No," he said. "I understand this is difficult, but as Sophie's biological mother, Erica does have certain rights. She walked out when Sophie was 3 months old. She doesn't have rights." "Actually, she does. She never formally terminated her parental rights, which means legally. I don't care what's legal. She abandoned her daughter. She doesn't get to just show up now and play mom." "Mr. Hayes, I know you're upset, but upset doesn't cover it." Daniel was standing now, pacing. "Sophie doesn't even remember her. She's been asking Victoria to adopt her. We have a family. We don't need Erica coming in and destroying that." "No one's trying to destroy anything. Erica just wants to meet Sophie, maybe establish some kind of relationship." "Over my dead body." He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking. He called Victoria immediately. "Hey," she answered. "What's up?" "Sophie's mother wants to see her." Silence on the other end. "Victoria? I'm here. I'm just..." "What?" Daniel explained the call. Victoria listened without interrupting, but he could hear her breathing getting faster. "What are you going to do?" she asked when he finished. "Fight it. There's no way I'm letting her anywhere near Sophie." "Can you do that? Legally?" "I don't know. I need to call a lawyer." "I'll make some calls. I know people who specialize in family law." "Thank you." "Daniel!" Victoria's voice was careful. "Are you okay?" "No, I feel like I'm going to throw up." "Come home. We'll figure this out together." Daniel left work early, his mind racing the whole drive home. He'd spent 8 years building a life for Sophie, protecting her from the pain of being abandoned. And now Erica wanted to waltz back in like none of that mattered? Hell no. Victoria was already home when he arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and notes scattered everywhere. "I called 3 lawyers," she said. 2 of them can meet with us tomorrow. The 3rd has an opening next week." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Victoria stood up and hugged him. "We're in this together, remember?" Daniel held on to her, feeling the fear that had been building all afternoon start to ease slightly. That night, they told Sophie together. Daniel had debated keeping it from her, but Victoria convinced him she deserved to know. Sophie listened with wide eyes as Daniel explained that her birth mother wanted to meet her. "Why?" Sophie asked. "I don't know, Bug." "Does she know about you and Victoria getting married?" "I doubt it." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I don't want to see her." "You don't have to." "I mean it, Dad. She left us. You said she didn't want to be a mom, so why does she get to come back now?" Daniel pulled Sophie into his lap. "I don't know. But I promise I'm going to do everything I can to protect you." "Will the lawyer make her go away?" "I hope so." Sophie looked at Victoria. "Are you still going to adopt me?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "If you still want me to." "I do. You're my mom, not her." Daniel felt his throat close up. Victoria reached over and took Sophie's hand. "Then we'll fight this," Victoria said. "All of us together?" The legal battle was exhausting. Erica had a lawyer, court-appointed, but still competent. She claimed she'd gotten clean, found work, and genuinely wanted to reconnect with her daughter. She painted Daniel as vindictive and unwilling to give her a second chance. Daniel's lawyer, a sharp woman named Jennifer, argued that Erica had abandoned Sophie and shown no interest in her for 8 years, that Sophie had a stable home with Daniel and Victoria, that introducing Erica now would only cause harm. The court ordered a psychological evaluation for Sophie. A social worker came to the house, talking to Sophie alone, asking questions about her life, her relationship with Daniel and Victoria, how she felt about her birth mother. Sophie was honest. She told them she was happy, that she didn't want to meet Erica, that Victoria was the only mom she'd ever known or wanted. She asked me if I was mad at my birth mom, Sophie said that night after the social worker left. I said no. I just don't care about her. Daniel wasn't sure that was entirely true. Sophie had to feel something about the woman who'd given birth to her. But he didn't push it. The court date was set for early July, just weeks before the wedding. Daniel tried to keep things normal for Sophie, but the stress was eating him alive. He barely slept, lost weight he couldn't afford to lose, snapped at people at work. Victoria held everything together. She took over most of the household responsibilities, made sure Sophie got to school and activities, dealt with wedding planning, and still managed to run her company. She was a rock when Daniel felt like he was falling apart. One night, 2 weeks before the court date, Daniel broke down. They were in bed, Victoria reading something on her tablet, while Daniel stared at the ceiling. "What if I lose her?" he said suddenly. Victoria set down the tablet. "You're not going to lose her. You don't know that. What if the court decides Erica deserves another chance? What if they order visitation and Sophie hates it and I can't protect her?" "Daniel, I can't lose her, Victoria. I can't. She's everything to me." "I know." Victoria pulled him close. "But you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. What if Erica wants custody? What if she tries to take Sophie away? Then we'll fight. We'll get the best lawyers. We'll present every piece of evidence showing that Sophie's better off with us. We'll do whatever it takes." Daniel turned to look at her. "Why are you so calm about this?" "Because someone has to be, and because I genuinely believe we're going to win. Sophie's voice matters. She's old enough that the court will listen to what she wants, and she wants to stay with us." "But what if that's not enough?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll figure it out." "But Daniel, you can't live in the what-ifs. You have to trust that the system will do the right thing." "I don't trust the system. I trust me. And I've been doing this alone for 8 years. I know how to protect her." "You're not alone anymore," Victoria said firmly. "Stop acting like you are." Daniel felt something crack in his chest. She was right. He'd been so used to handling everything himself that he'd forgotten what it meant to have a partner, to share the weight. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be sorry. Just let me help." "I don't know how. Start by believing me when I say we're going to get through this." Daniel took a shaky breath. Okay. We'll get through it." Victoria kissed him. "Together." The court hearing was brutal. Daniel had to sit across from Erica for the first time in 8 years and listen to her talk about how much she regretted leaving, how she'd been young and scared and not ready for motherhood. She looked different, healthier, sober, like she'd claimed. She cried when she talked about Sophie, said she thought about her every day. Daniel wanted to believe she was lying, that this was all an act, but he could see the genuine remorse in her eyes, and it made everything harder. Because if she really had changed, if she really was trying to make amends, then what right did he have to keep Sophie from her? But then Sophie's statement was read into the record. Her words from the psychological evaluation, her clear preference to stay with Daniel and Victoria, her lack of desire to meet Erica. And Jennifer presented evidence of Daniel's care for Sophie over the years. School records showing perfect attendance and good grades. Letters from teachers praising Sophie's development. Testimonials from family members about the stable, loving home Daniel had provided. She presented Victoria's role too, the stability she'd brought, her commitment to Sophie, the adoption process they'd already begun. The judge listened to everything. Then she called a recess to review the materials. Daniel, Victoria, and Jennifer waited in a small conference room. Daniel couldn't sit still. He paced, his mind running through every possible outcome. "Stop," Victoria said finally. "You're making me nervous." "I can't help it." "Come here," He sat beside her, and she took his hand. "No matter what happens in there, we're going to be okay," she said. "You can't promise that." "Yes, I can, because we have each other, and we have Sophie, and that's not going to change." Daniel wanted to believe her. He tried. When they were called back into the courtroom, the judge looked at them all seriously. "I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony," she said. "This is a difficult case. Ms. Ramirez has clearly made significant progress in her recovery, and I don't take that lightly. However, my primary concern is the well-being of the child." Daniel held his breath. "Sophie is 7 years old. She has a stable home environment with Mr. Hayes and his fiancée. She has expressed a clear preference to remain in that environment. While I understand Ms. Ramirez's desire to reconnect with her daughter, I cannot ignore Sophie's wishes or disrupt the stability she currently enjoys." Erica started crying. "Therefore," the judge continued, "I am denying the request for immediate visitation. However, I am ordering that Ms. Ramirez be allowed to send letters to Sophie, which Mr. Hayes will hold and share with Sophie when and if he and his family determine it is appropriate. If Ms. Ramirez maintains her sobriety and stability for 2 years, she may petition the court again for reconsideration." Daniel felt his knees go weak. Victoria grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "Thank you," he managed to say. The judge nodded. "Mr. Hayes, I want to be clear. Your daughter is fortunate to have you. The care and love you've provided is evident, but I also want to encourage compassion. Ms. Ramirez made mistakes, but she's trying to do better. That deserves some recognition, even if it doesn't result in the outcome she hoped for." Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. Outside the courtroom, Erica approached him. Victoria immediately stepped forward, protective, but Daniel put a hand on her arm. "It's okay," he said. Erica stopped a few feet away. "Can I talk to you, just for a minute?" Daniel looked at Victoria. She nodded, though her expression said she'd be watching. He stepped aside with Erica, keeping some distance between them. "I'm not trying to take her from you," Erica said quietly. "I never was. I just wanted the chance to know her, to apologize." "You don't get to apologize to her. She doesn't even remember you." "I know, and that's my fault." Erica wiped her eyes. "I was 22 and terrified, and I made the worst decision of my life. I've spent 8 years regretting it." "That doesn't change what you did." "I know, but I'm not that person anymore. I got sober. I have a job, an apartment, a therapist. I'm trying to build a life I can be proud of." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Part of him wanted to hate her, to stay angry, but looking at her now, he saw someone who was genuinely broken and trying to heal. "The judge said you can write to her," he said finally. "If you want to do that, I'll keep the letters. And if Sophie ever asks about you, I'll tell her the truth. That you made mistakes, but you're trying to do better." Erica's face crumpled. "Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Sophie, so that someday, if she has questions, she'll have answers. That's more than I deserve." "Yeah," Daniel said. "It is." He walked back to Victoria, who immediately took his hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be." They left the courthouse together, and Daniel felt like he could finally breathe again. The wedding was small and perfect. They set up chairs in the backyard under string lights Victoria had hung with Claire's help. Daniel's parents were there, along with Claire and her husband. A few close friends from work. Victoria's assistant, Sarah, and a couple of executives from the company who'd become genuine friends over the years. Sophie was the flower girl, wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself. Cooper wore a bow tie and tried very hard to behave. Daniel stood under the oak tree, watching Victoria walk toward him, and felt his throat get tight. She was beautiful, wearing a simple white dress, her hair down, smiling like she couldn't help it. When she reached him, she took his hands. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." The ceremony was short. They'd written their own vows, both of them stumbling through the words because emotions kept getting in the way. "I promise to show up," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "Not just physically, but actually present. I promise to choose us, even when work is calling or things get hard. I promise to love Sophie like she's mine, because she is. And I promise to love you for exactly who you are, not who I think you should be." Daniel had to clear his throat twice before he could speak. "I promise to let you in, even when I'm scared. I promise to trust you, to believe that you're not going to leave. I promise to support your dreams and your ambitions, to never make you feel like you have to choose between your work and your family. and I promise to love you through every imperfect, messy, beautiful moment. When the officiant said they could kiss, Victoria pulled him close and whispered, "We did it."
"Yeah," Daniel said. "We really did." The reception was in the same backyard, tables set up on the grass, food from a local catering company that Sophie had helped pick, music playing from speakers Daniel had borrowed from work.
They danced. Daniel with Victoria, then with Sophie, then with his mother, who cried through the whole thing. Victoria danced with Daniel's dad, who told her she was good for his son and to please keep feeding him because he'd lost too much weight during the custody battle. Sophie gave a speech that was mostly about Cooper, but also mentioned how happy she was that Victoria was officially her mom now, even though the adoption paperwork wasn't final yet. Claire got drunk and told embarrassing stories about Daniel as a kid. It was chaos and laughter and everything a wedding should be. As the evening wound down and guests started leaving, Daniel found Victoria sitting on the back porch steps, watching Sophie and Cooper play in the yard under the string lights. He sat beside her, and she leaned against him. "Happy?" he asked. "Incredibly." "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their daughter chase the dog around the yard. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said. "Always. A year ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had my company, my success, my independence. I thought that was enough. I thought wanting more was weak. And now? Now I know I was wrong. This, you, Sophie, this life we've built, this is everything. And it doesn't make me weak, it makes me whole." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "You make us whole too." Sophie ran over, breathless and grass-stained. "Can Cooper sleep in my room tonight, please?" "He always sleeps in your room," Daniel said. "But can he sleep on the bed? Just for tonight, since it's a special day?" Victoria laughed. "Sure, Bug, why not?" Sophie cheered and ran back to the dog. "We're going to regret that," Daniel said. "Probably, but we'll deal with it tomorrow." "Together?" Victoria smiled. "Together." The adoption finalization happened in September. They all dressed up and went to the courthouse, the same building where they'd fought Erica's petition, but this time for something joyful. The judge was different, a kind-looking woman who asked Sophie if she understood what adoption meant. "It means Victoria gets to be my real mom," Sophie said confidently. "Forever." "That's right, and you want that? More than anything." The judge signed the papers, and just like that, Victoria became Sophie's legal mother. They took pictures outside the courthouse, all of them grinning, Sophie holding the certificate like it was a trophy. That night, they celebrated with ice cream and a movie marathon. Sophie fell asleep between them on the couch, and Daniel looked at Victoria over their daughter's head. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is everything I never let myself want." "Me too." "Worth the risk?" Victoria smiled. "Every single bit of it." Over the following months, life settled into a new normal. Victoria's company continued to thrive, but she'd gotten better at delegating, at trusting her team. She made it to every one of Sophie's school events, helped with homework, packed lunches even when she had early meetings. Daniel got promoted again, plant manager this time, with a salary that meant they could start saving for Sophie's college fund and maybe take that vacation Victoria kept talking about. Sophie flourished. Her grades were excellent. She made friends easily. She started talking about becoming a paleontologist when she grew up, and Daniel and Victoria encouraged every bit of it. The letters from Erica came sporadically. Daniel kept them in a box in his closet, just like he'd promised. Sophie knew they existed, but hadn't asked to read them yet. Maybe someday she would. Maybe not. It was her choice. One Saturday in November, almost exactly a year after that first Christmas together, Daniel woke to find Victoria already up, sitting in the kitchen with her laptop. "Working on a weekend?" he asked, pouring coffee. "Just checking something." She turned the laptop to show him. "I've been thinking about expanding, opening a West Coast office." "That's huge." "It is, but I've also been thinking about promoting Sarah to COO, giving her more responsibility so I can step back a bit more." Daniel sat down across from her. "Why?" "Because I don't want to miss things. Sophie's growing up so fast, and I want to be present for it. I want to be at every dance recital and soccer game and science fair. I want to have dinner with my family without worrying about what's happening at the office." "You don't have to give up your work for us." "I'm not giving it up. I'm just redefining what success looks like. Victoria reached across the table for his hand. Success used to mean building the biggest company, making the most money, proving I was good enough. But now, success is this: coming home to you and Sophie, having time to actually live instead of just work. You sure? Completely. Daniel squeezed her hand. I love you. I love you too. Sophie wandered in, still in pajamas, Cooper trailing behind her. Are we making pancakes? Victoria closed her laptop. We are. Want to help? Obviously. They made pancakes together, the kitchen filling with laughter and smoke from the slightly burnt ones. Daniel watched his wife and daughter work side by side, covered in flour, arguing about whether chocolate chips were better than blueberries, and felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. This was it. This was the life he'd built from broken pieces and fear and the courage to try again. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with balancing everything, still had days when nothing seemed to work right. But they had each other, and that was enough. That afternoon, they went to the park. Sophie ran ahead with Cooper while Daniel and Victoria walked hand in hand behind them. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Victoria asked. If we'd both stuck to our guns that first night and refused to give it a chance? Sometimes, usually when I'm trying to fall asleep. And I'm grateful we were both too stubborn to walk away. Victoria laughed. Is that what you call it? Stubbornness? What would you call it? Hope, buried deep down under all the fear and walls we'd built. Hope that maybe there was something worth trying for. Daniel thought about that, about the walls he'd built after Sophie's mother left, about Victoria's fear of being vulnerable, about how they'd both been so convinced they were broken that they almost missed finding each other. You know what I think? He said. What? I think we weren't broken. We were just waiting for the right person to show us we were already whole. We just needed someone to see it. Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. She kissed him, there in the middle of the park, with Sophie calling for them to come see something Cooper had found. They pulled apart and ran to catch up with their daughter, and Daniel thought about all the moments that had led them here. The blind date neither wanted, the awkward coffee meetings, the first time Sophie met Victoria, the fights and fears and small victories. Every single moment had been worth it. Because here's what Daniel had learned. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone willing to be imperfect with you. Someone who'd show up even when it was hard. Someone who'd choose you again and again, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Victoria had shown him that. She'd taught him to trust again, to open up, to believe he deserved happiness. And he'd shown her that she didn't have to choose between success and love, that she could have both. That being strong didn't mean being alone. They'd saved each other, really. Not in some dramatic, movie-perfect way, but in the quiet, everyday way that actually mattered. By showing up. By trying. By refusing to give up even when it would have been easier. That night, after Sophie was asleep and the house was quiet, Daniel and Victoria sat on the back porch like they often did. The air was cool, autumn giving way to winter, but they were warm under a shared blanket. Happy? Daniel asked, like he always did. Always, Victoria answered, like she always did. And it was true. Not because their life was perfect. It wasn't. Not because they never struggled. They did. But because they'd learned that happiness wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about finding someone to figure it out with. Daniel looked at the house behind them, thought about Sophie sleeping upstairs, about the life they'd built from nothing but hope and stubbornness. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, closed off, scared, convinced that protecting himself was more important than taking risks. And he thought about who he was now, a husband, a father, a man who'd learned that the biggest risk was refusing to try at all. What are you thinking about? Victoria asked. Just that I'm glad your colleagues set you up on that blind date. Even though you almost didn't show up? Especially because I almost didn't show up, makes the fact that I did mean something. Victoria settled against him, her head on his shoulder. We almost missed this, but we didn't. No, we didn't. They sat there under the stars, two people who'd been certain they were better off alone discovering they were wrong. Two people who'd built walls discovering those walls didn't have to be permanent. Two people finding that love, real, messy, imperfect love, was worth every moment of fear it took to reach for it. And in the end, that was the only lesson that mattered. That being vulnerable was terrifying but necessary. That opening your heart meant risking pain but also inviting joy. That family wasn't just blood, it was choice, commitment, showing up even when it was hard. Daniel Hayes had spent 8 years protecting himself and his daughter from hurt. But Victoria Hale had shown him something more important than protection. She'd shown him that some things were worth the risk. And every single day, he chose to take that risk again. Chose her, chose their family, chose love over fear, because that's what it all came down to in the end. Choosing to stay when running would be easier. Choosing to trust when doubt would be safer. Choosing to love when guarding your heart would hurt less. They'd both made that choice, and they'd keep making it day after day through every challenge and triumph and ordinary moment in between. That was the real story. Not about a factory supervisor and a billionaire CEO who somehow made it work despite their differences, but about two broken people who found each other and discovered they didn't need to be fixed. They just needed someone to love them exactly as they were. And in loving each other, they'd become more than they ever could have been alone. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and Victoria shivered slightly. Daniel pulled her closer. "Should we go inside?" he asked. "Not yet. I like it out here." "Cold, though." "I've got you. I'm warm enough." And really, that said it all. They had each other. They had Sophie. They had this life they'd built together, imperfect and messy, and absolutely worth every second. Daniel looked up at the stars, thinking about the path that had brought them here, the wrong turns that turned out to be right, the fears they'd conquered, the love they'd found when neither was looking for it. He thought about Sophie, asleep upstairs, dreaming whatever 7-year-olds dreamed about. She had a family now, a real one. 2 parents who loved her, a home that was stable, a future full of possibilities. That was what mattered, not the money or status or any of the surface differences. Just this, people who showed up for each other, people who chose love. "I love you," he said into the darkness. Victoria turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the porch light. "I love you too. Even with all my baggage and issues and tendency to shut down when things get hard, especially because of those things. They make you real. They make this real. We're pretty lucky, aren't we? The luckiest." They sat there a while longer, wrapped in each other and the quiet certainty of what they'd built. Eventually the cold won out and they went inside, checking on Sophie one more time before heading to bed. As Daniel fell asleep with Victoria in his arms, he thought about the man who'd sat in his truck outside that restaurant, debating whether to just drive home. The man who'd been so sure he didn't need anyone that he was better off alone. He was grateful that man had been wrong. Grateful he'd walked into that restaurant. Grateful for every awkward conversation and uncertain moment that had led him here. Because this life, this love, this family, was everything. Not perfect, not always easy, but real and honest and worth every risk he'd taken to get here. And tomorrow he'd wake up and choose it all over again, every day for the rest of his life. That was the promise. That was the commitment. That was love in its truest, messiest, most beautiful form. And Daniel Hayes, for the first time in 8 years, wasn't afraid of it anymore. He was home. Sonnet 4.5.